I've been married to my husband, who I'll call Bob, for 10 years now. We were high school classmates, and it seems we had mutual feelings back then, but we never got into a relationship. Years later, at a class reunion, I met Bob again. He confessed his feelings to me while a bit tipsy, saying,
I've always regretted not telling you how I felt back then.
I knew he was under the influence, but I was so happy to hear it and immediately said, I'd love to. We started dating from that day and got married after a year. After we married, I worked for a while, but I quit when I got pregnant. One evening, while we were having dinner, I asked Bob something that had been on my mind. Why were you so drunk that day? I referred to the day he confessed at the reunion. I had never seen Bob drunk in all the time we lived together, which meant he could hold his liquor well. Even after our marriage, when we'd have drinks in the evening, I'd always be the one to get tipsy first. Bob could handle his drinks far better than I could. But at that reunion, he was quite drunk early on, and it suddenly made me curious. When I asked, his face turned a bit red, maybe due to the alcohol, and he replied,
I got nervous about confessing to you and drank too much.
Seeing him blush like that was really adorable. Our child was born safely, and I noticed a slight change in Bob. He's always been a bit serious and had an inapproachable aura, which seemed to intensify a bit more. One day, while I was preparing dinner, I got a call from my husband, Bob. It was unusual for him to call at that time. Picking up my cell phone, I answered, Hello?
Sorry, I've got a sudden drinking party, so I don't need dinner at night,
he said. It wasn't uncommon for him to go out for drinks after work, so I just told him to be careful on his way home and hung up. Luckily, I had just started making dinner, so nothing was wasted. After I finished dinner and put our child to bed, I found myself waiting for my husband, Bob, to return home. He had told me,
You can go to sleep first.
But for some reason, I ended up waiting for him. Maybe this is one of the joys of being a wife. Waiting for someone whose return time is uncertain can be quite hard. Fortunately, it was still only 9 p.m., so I wasn't very sleepy yet. There were a few things left for me to do, so I kept myself busy while waiting patiently for Bob. An hour passed, and Bob still wasn't back. I had nearly finished all my tasks and had nothing else to do. He usually returns from his drinking sessions between 10 and 11 p.m., so I wondered aloud if he would be back soon. Sitting at the dining table, I sipped some tea to keep the sleepiness at bay. After about 30 minutes, I finished my tea, and the clock struck 11 p.m., but Bob still hadn't returned or called. I began to worry, thinking, how late do these business drinking parties usually go? I thought it was odd that he hadn't sent even a text if he was going to be later than usual. Considering Bob's responsible nature, I expected at least a message from him. Suddenly, I felt a wave of anxiety, thinking, could something have happened to him? The worry started to grow inside me. Just as I decided to call him, I heard the front door open. Hearing his voice say,
I'm home,
relieved me. I greeted him back. It was almost midnight. When I went to the entrance, I immediately knew why he was late. Bob was unusually drunk. He's usually very good at handling his liquor and had never come home drunk from a drinking party before. Supporting him as he staggered, I asked, What happened? He looked at me.
Honey, please listen to my complaints,
he slurred. That night, Bob came home loudly, not minding that our child was asleep. I quickly assured him to another room, saying, Stop, stop. Well, this is unusual for you. What happened? Bob said,
I was drinking with about 5 colleagues today. Then everyone started talking about their wives.
Slurring a bit, I wasn't sure why he was speaking so formally, but I just nodded along to Bob's words, giving him my full attention. Bob continued, slightly pouting,
They were awful, saying things like they don't see their wives as women anymore, or they're just in between liking and disliking them, and even that they leave them if someone better came along. Terrible, right?
Speaking in a childlike tone, Bob continued his story. expressing his feelings in a way that left me feeling a mix of emotions. I responded with a nonchalant "huh" as he spoke. Hearing my response, he went on,
You know, I really, really love my wife. I adore her.
My heart fluttered at his words. I internally squealed with joy but managed to keep my composure, casually nodding in response.
You might think it's silly, but I still get butterflies when we kiss or hug. It's hard for me to join in those kinds of conversations, so I just replied briefly and ended up drinking a whole bottle.
I chuckled at his confession. Without waiting for my reply, he continued,
Every time I hug you, I think to myself, I love my wife. You might find it cheesy.
He looked at me with an anxious expression. I reassured him, no, it's not cheesy at all. Bob then mentioned,
I have to drink with them again next week. I'm not looking forward to it. That was my complaint. I'm going to sleep now. Good night.
He collapsed into bed and fell asleep instantly, snoring. I covered him with a blanket and softly said, Thank you for everything. Good night. It was the first time I'd seen him so drunk and speaking so differently. Him calling me wife made me laugh a bit. The Bob I knew didn't usually express himself this way, so hearing his sincere feelings, likely unfiltered due to the alcohol, made me even happier. It was comforting to know that he thought of me fondly even though he didn't always show it. I felt truly blessed as I looked at his sleeping face and then drifted off to sleep myself. The next morning, Bob woke up. I wondered if he'd forgotten everything from the night before due to his drunkenness, but he spoke with a hoarse voice, likely from a hangover.
I said some embarrassing stuff yesterday, didn't I? Oh no,
He exclaimed, unusually animated for the morning. Seeing this different, adorable side of Bob, I felt energized from the start of the day. He had been watching his diet recently to counteract any weight gain, but I decided to treat him with his favorite dish, pork cutlet curry, and some real beer, not just light beer. That evening, I hoped he would enjoy the meal. Bob was thrilled like a child at the dinner table, which made me feel happy too. When he asked,
why this special meal?
I bashfully replied, Well, after what you said yesterday. Bob, looking embarrassed but affectionate, pulled me close, gazed into my eyes.
I need to say this sober too. I love you. Please, always stay with me,
He said. His words brought tears to my eyes. They were simple, straightforward, but so genuine and so like him that it made me incredibly happy. Then, in his typical fashion, turning bashful and,
Bring the drinks, let's drink together. Drink and forget everything,
he said. But I knew I would never forget the words he said to me. After so many years of marriage, to still feel this love, I couldn't help but feel like the luckiest person. Sorry for gushing so much. Thank you, Bob. I love you too.